This is the 5th video in my series on the Latin subjunctive, and in this video I want to explain indirect questions. If you've watched the previous video on indirect commands, you'll find this video very similar to the last. Indeed, with one important exception, which I will try not to discuss in too much detail, you will find that indirect questions are almost identical to indirect commands. We will start then with the same structure as in the last video. We'll start with an example in English of a direct question. "What are you doing?" the woman asked her daughter. That's a direct question. It's a direct question because the words of the question are given in the sentence. They're given in quotation marks. The indirect version of that question, the woman asked her daughter what she was doing. That is called the indirect version of the question because the words of the question are not quoted, they are explained. With the exception of the subjunctive for the verb that is asked about, it is exactly the same in Latin as in English. Here it is in Latin for the direct question. "What are you doing?" the woman asked her daughter. That's the English, obviously. And in Latin, "Quid facis, femina filiam quaesivit?" Almost identical, don't you think? Here's the indirect. In English, the woman asked her daughter what she was doing. In Latin, "Femina quaesivit, quid filiam faceret?" Before I move on, notice the difference. In English, what she was doing, ordinary indicative. In Latin, quid faceret, that's in the subjunctive. You could get away with putting that directly into English. The woman asked what her daughter might be doing. That is permissible, it's done. All I would say against it is that it is usually unnecessary. But that's how it's done in Latin. You turn the verb of what is being asked about into the subjunctive. And there is the only difference between the English and the Latin usage. This difference being that Latin uses a subjunctive where English uses the ordinary indicative. There is a very close similarity of the English and Latin construction of indirect questions. As I said earlier, I don't want to discuss this in too much detail. This is something that belongs to another video, which I will make in due course. For the moment, I will merely mention that in both English and Latin indirect versions of the question, the indirect verb moves back a tense. Let me explain. "What are you doing?" the woman asked. That's the present, isn't it? What are you doing? "Quid facis, quaesivit femina?" Again, a present tense for what is being asked about. Once you move to the indirect version of that question, notice how the verb goes back one tense, from the present to the imperfect. "What are you doing?" the woman asked. The woman asked what she was doing. It's the same in Latin. "Quaesivit femina quid faceret?" I've promised to discuss this in more detail later on, not in this video, but in another video. For the moment, it's enough to reassure you that what many people regard as the dreaded sequence of tenses in Latin is nowhere so difficult as it is said to be. The rules in Latin are almost identical to the rules which we follow in English. But let me do another of those tables at the bottom of the slide to show that we are looking at an indirect question as opposed to an indirect command, or perhaps some other subjunctive construction. We have the who is asking and the what is asked column. In the who is asking column, you always have an indicative verb. Well, perhaps not always, but for my purposes, always. In the right-hand column, you can have quid plus the subjunctive, that is, what plus the subjunctive. You can have quis plus the subjunctive, cur, num, that's an interesting one, ubi, when or where, utrum, whether, another interesting one. Indeed, you might say that you can express an indirect question with the subjunctive and any particle of questioning. But these are the main ones that you'll see. Let's then have a look at some examples on the right-hand side. Purum rogavi quid fecissent. I asked the boy what he had done. I could say something about that particular use of the pluperfect. It's a nice illustration of the sequence of tenses, but once again, the rule is the same in English, and so I'll leave it standing. Scire voluit magister quis clamaret. The teacher wanted to know who was shouting. I feel obliged to give some commentary on that one, but I can't think of any commentary that I haven't already supplied. Scire voluit magister, cur clamavissent puri. The teacher wanted to know why the boys had shouted. Oh, here is a commentary. So long as you recognise clamavissent as a pluperfect subjunctive, and so long as you know that indirect questions exist, this translates so exactly into English, or rather, these Latin tenses translate so exactly into English tenses that no commentary is needed. You can ask why a subjunctive is needed to form an indirect question in Latin, but so long as you don't expect an answer to that question, the whole construction is very simple and very natural, because it is almost identical, indeed it is identical except for the use of the subjunctive, to the way in which we in English form indirect questions. Puri se rogabant, num magister ebrius esset. The boys asked themselves whether the teacher was drunk. You could put this into English as, the boys asked themselves whether the teacher might not be drunk. You can do that in English. Maybe a little unnatural nowadays, but you can do it in English. And if you do that in English, you have an almost literal translation of the Latin. Again, nothing special to say. Pater nesciebat ubi essent liberi. The father did not know where his children were. The father did not know where his children might be. I could say more, but I won't. Me rogavit, utrum secum proficisci vellem. He asked me if I wanted to go with him, or he asked me whether I might want to go with him. Except I feel the continuous need to pull myself back from talking about the sequence of tenses. I think that will do for indirect questions. There is very little to it. So I will thank you once more for having watched this video, and as ever, hope that you'll be able to watch the others in the series. Thank you for watching.